Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, The Eclectic Reader. So today I am doing my March reading wrap-up. In the month of March, I read 8 books. So in March I participated in 2 reading challenges, March Mystery Madness and Middle Grade March, and I had a wonderful time. Now I'm obsessed with middle grade fantasies. I hadn't read one in years. So this was a really cool way to get back into reading middle grade and also to discover some recently published middle grade novels. So the first book that I read was Woods Runner by Gary Paulsen. Now this is actually a few years old. This book came out probably in the 2010s. And Gary Paulsen is famous for his book Hatchet, which I was assigned and many Americans were assigned in middle school. All of Gary Paulsen's books deal with life in the wilderness. They are survival novels, and this one is no different, except that it is set in colonial Pennsylvania. Our protagonist is Samuel, who is a 12-year-old boy, and he has grown up in the woods. He knows how to hunt, and it's actually while he is hunting a bear, I believe, he sees a fire in the distance. His village is on fire, and so he goes to investigate and discovers that the British have destroyed his village and his parents are gone. His parents have been kidnapped, he learns. And so this entire novel, he is trying to find his parents and rescue them from the prison in New York City where they are. This book does not pull any punches when it comes to depicting the violence, the brutality of warfare. I think that this is a really good book for introducing children to the reality of war, that it is not glamorous. There's also a lot of really practical information about survival, as well as sections at the end of each chapter about what life was like in revolutionary America. However, it wasn't particularly engaging, and that's too bad since it is supposed to be a fairly fast-paced novel, right? This is a 12-year-old boy who is escaping from violence both from the British and from some Native Americans who were siding with the British, but it did drag, and it didn't capture my attention the way that I would have expected. So this is a good book for introducing children to the reality of war, but I only gave it 3 stars because it wasn't as captivating as it could have been. And the next book that I read was a reread, The Secret of Platform 13 by Eva Ibbotson. When I was a child, I was obsessed with Ibbotson's novels. I read all of her children's novels. I never read her YA books, and if she read any adult books, I didn't read those either, but I read all of her children's fantasy novels. And the first one that I read that got me into Ibbotson's books was The Secret of Platform 13, which is a very popular children's classic. However, I'd completely forgotten the plot, so it felt like I was reading this book for the very first time. And I can definitely see how this book influenced the Harry Potter series, particularly the first book. So in this novel, we start with a kidnapping. There is a woman who kidnaps a prince from a magical island. There's a door between London on platform 13 that leads into this magical island. But this door closes and only reopens for a few days, once every 10 years, I think. And so after this woman kidnaps the prince, the door closes, and for the next 10 years, there's no way that the magical creatures living on the island can go back into London and try to find the prince. But once the door opens, a group of magical creatures are selected by the king and queen to try to rescue the prince. Turns out the prince is a complete brat, and they really don't want him to be the prince, but they do need to rescue him for the king and queen. So the story is very much a classic children's book. It has all of the tropes that we would expect. If you've ever read a Roald Dahl book, or if you've read the Railway children's books, this has the same kind of vibe. It is delightful. I loved all the characters, and it reminded me that I really need to reread all of Ibbotson's children's books. So I gave it 5 stars. The third book that I read is actually a fairly recent release, and that is The Trials of Morrigan Crow, which is the first book in the Nevermore series by Jessica Townsend. Now this book is really popular on BookTube, and I completely understand why. So at the start of the book, we learn that Morrigan Crow is cursed, or at least that's what her family has told her. She's cursed and that she has a very limited lifespan. She's like 12 years old and she is supposed to die within the year. But on the day of her death, on her death day, she is whisked away into this magical world by a man named Jupiter North, who has selected Morrigan Crow to be his candidate for this exclusive society in this magical world. So Jupiter North wants Morrigan Crow to try to get into this society, but for her to do so, she has to overcome a series of trials. Along the way, she meets a boy who visits her a lot at the hotel where she lives. Jupiter North owns a hotel. This hotel includes a vampire dwarf, a talking cat. There's all kinds of magic going on in this world. And she makes friends, but then also she has to overcome these challenges in hopes of entering the secret society. But there appears to be another man out there. He's very mysterious. And he would like Morrigan Crow to be his candidate. So there's a mystery surrounding Morrigan's identity, also what this wonder society is that she's trying to enter, and there are a lot of other mysteries involved. We get somewhat of a conclusion at the end of the first book, but this is the first in a series and I look forward to continuing. I gave it 4 stars. The 4th book I read in the month of March is Murder Wears White by Stephanie Blackmore. This is book 2 in the Wedding Planner mystery series, and I read book 1 in February. So I was continuing with the series because I really enjoyed reading book 1. But book 2 was somewhat of a disappointment. I ultimately only gave it 3 stars. So in book 1, Mallory, who is our protagonist, Sleuth, because this is a cozy mystery, she inherits a mansion from a woman named Sylvia. And this mansion, she and her sister Rachel are transforming into a bed and breakfast. But at the beginning of book 2, the hotel or this bed and breakfast mansion is far from ready. However, Whitney is going to be her first client and she would like to get married as soon as possible because her father is ill and is about to die, and she would like her father to be able to walk her down the aisle. So that's part of the story, getting the mansion ready for the wedding. But then Whitney has a past of her own. Her mother had disappeared years before and then found dead. And the man who was accused of her mother's death was in prison. And Mallory's boyfriend in this book was his defense attorney. And then, in this novel, the second book in the series, Whitney's aunt is found dead. She was killed by an arsenic-laden Tic Tac. So she's killed via a Tic Tac. And then it appears that the mansion is spooky and like there is some ghosts in this mansion, and so there's a group of ghost hunters who are trying to rid the mansion of its ghosts. So there are so many things going on in the story, and that's ultimately the reason why it didn't really work as well. Although I liked how there were several storylines also in the first book, and that there were a series of suspects as well as a series of criminals in the first book, I felt like the different plot lines were better connected to each other, whereas in this book, I felt like some of the storylines were stronger than others, and some of them just simply didn't need to be there. It was distracting from the major mystery, so that also the conclusions weren't as satisfactory. I will definitely be continuing this series. I think that the characters are nice. I do like Mallory's boyfriend. I think that their relationship is good. I wish that Mallory's sister Rachel would choose better boyfriends, because this is the second time when her sister has made decisions that weren't the best. It's a trope that gets a bit old. I am not spoiling the book for you, however. Like I said, there's a lot going on in this novel. But there were certain tropes that are now getting a bit tired, and I would prefer the author to do something a bit different in the future books. So like I said, it was okay. I gave it 3 stars. This might just be sophomore syndrome, and I look forward to continuing with the series. The 5th book that I read is another cozy mystery. This one is an Amish cozy. I know that there is a reading challenge in April called Amish in April. I never thought I would ever read an Amish fiction novel. It doesn't really appeal to me. But Matchmaking Can Be Murder is by Amanda Flower, and I love Amanda Flower's books. This is the first in the Amish matchmaking mystery series. Now, I was told by some other booktubers that I should start with the Candy Shop mystery series first because there are some spoilers for that series in this follow-up series. I usually don't like that. I think that authors shouldn't include spoilers from older mysteries in later mysteries, especially because I know that I tend to read cozy mysteries out of order. I often read books that are 17th in a series or something like that, and I expect that there won't be major spoilers from older books. And this is especially true if this is the first in a series. I wouldn't expect spoilers from a previous series. However, I will be reading the first in the Candy Shop mystery series because I very much enjoyed Matchmaking Can Be Murder. So in our story, we have Millie. Millie is our protagonist sleuth. She's an Amish woman who has returned to her hometown in Harvest, Ohio. As I have mentioned before, all of Amanda Flower's books take place in Ohio. I am from Northeast Ohio, so I love reading books set in Ohio. There is an enormous Amish community in Southern Ohio. Anyway, Millie has returned to her hometown after her husband has passed away. She is a widow. She'd also been taking care of her sister in Michigan, but she has now also passed away. So she's back in Ohio and she's helping her cousin Edith out. So Edith is a widow herself. Actually, there are several widows in this novel, which is, I think, really interesting. Edith has children from her first husband, and she's running the greenhouse that her husband had been running before. And in this society, men are the ones who run the business. So she is interested in remarrying purely so that somebody can continue the business and she can bring in income. That's really important. Now, Edith has a lot of talent herself. She has some business acumen, but it's important for her to have a husband. She's engaged to a man named Zeke. And Millie, our protagonist, who calls herself an Amish matchmaker, doesn't think that Zeke is a good fit for Edith. Edith finally admits that he's not a good fit, and she breaks up the engagement. But then Zeke is found dead in her greenhouse, and she becomes the major suspect. So of course, Millie wants to clear her friend's name, but it appears that there are some mysteries involved, not just who killed Zeke, but what it is that Edith is hiding from Millie. Millie is also friends with an English woman. So the term English is used by the Amish to refer to those who are not Amish. So she has an English woman. I forget her name now, but this English woman wants to help her out. She's a very nosy person. She's also one of Millie's childhood friends, and she wants to help her clear Edith's name. But also, it appears that this woman's granddaughter, Bailey, was in a relationship with Zeke while he was engaged to Edith. So, Zeke had hurt Bailey as well as Edith. So, both of them team up together, trying to figure out how Zeke was murdered, why Zeke was murdered, and what other secrets people might be holding in a community where secrets are hard to keep. What we learn in this book is that the Amish like to gossip. And oh, do they gossip. Also, while the women are not in positions of leadership, they sometimes assume that kind of leadership in the way that they interact with others. For example, one of the most powerful women is the bishop's wife. In fact, it might seem that the bishop's wife has more influence in the community than the bishop himself. And she's really annoying, but you can appreciate her leadership nonetheless. I really enjoy the way that Amanda Flower writes characters. And it's very clear that she has done her research into the Amish. She has respect for the way that they lead their lives. There aren't these cliches that we would expect from Amish fiction. So I really appreciate that. And like I said, I will be reading the Candy Shop mystery series first, and then continuing with this Matchmaker series. The next book that I read is The Dragon Warrior by Katie Zhao. This is also a middle grade fantasy novel that is inspired by Chinese mythology. This book has been compared to the Percy Jackson series. Now, I've never read the Percy Jackson series, but I do know that the Percy Jackson series is based on ancient Greek mythology. This series, The Dragon Warrior being the first, is based on Chinese mythology. And just as in the Percy Jackson series, there are gods that enter into the human realm, in this book, there are Chinese gods that enter into the human realm. Our protagonist is Farron Liu, who is 12 years old. She lives in San Francisco and is a member of the Jade Society, along with her brother Alex. Now, Farron and Alex are being raised by their grandfather because their father has gone missing. He had gone on this journey to fight demons and also to discover this mythological island. But he hasn't returned. They think he has died. The Jade Society was actually created to fight demons, but ever since Farron and Alex's father has gone missing, the Jade Society has decided that demons don't exist and that Farron and Alex's father was foolish and that he shouldn't have gone on this journey to fight demons and to find this island. But then Farron discovers that there are indeed demons. She encounters a demon in Chinatown, and that sets her on this journey to fight demons across the country in different Chinatowns, and she hopes to reach this mythological island. She has been selected to be Heaven's Warrior, and we come to learn what that is throughout the novel. But I really love the concept of this girl who is trying to learn what happened to her father. She has all of these magical abilities, of course, that is a very common trope in middle grade fantasy. But also that the gods themselves are quite ambivalent figures. Some of them are good and some of them are not so good. Some of them might be allies with the demons. It was really, really fast paced. It was quite a page turner. The only reason why I ultimately gave it 3 stars is because I'm not sure how I feel about the ending. And I don't want to get into spoilers, but I find it interesting that the gods aren't so likable, and I don't know what to make of that, or, you know, how a Chinese reader would feel about this novel. I'm not exactly sure where I sit on the characters as well. I would have liked more about the characters, more character development, and I'm hoping that the following books in this series will do that. So this was a 3-star book. It was okay, but I do hope to continue with the series. So the 7th book I finished is Withering-by-Sea by Judith Russell. This is another middle grade fantasy novel, except one written for younger middle grade readers. The language is quite simple. It's also a short book. Our protagonist is Stella Montgomery, who lives in the Hotel Majestic with her 3 aunts. This book really does give me Roald Dahl vibes. You have these really cruel aunts who are making the girl study all the time, and she doesn't really get to have a childhood. But Stella is a very curious girl. She loves to learn. She found this historic almanac, and one day she is reading her historic almanac in the hotel lobby where she sees this man hide a package in a plant. He digs a hole in the soil and hides the package. In the middle of the night, while she is just checking out the hotel, she sees that the man has been murdered by a gang of criminals and murdered over the package. And now she has the package. So now she is being targeted by the gang of criminals. So what is this package? Who is this man? And I just told you it's a fantasy. What is the magic that's involved here? I will definitely be continuing with this series. There is a sequel. If you're looking for a fun, short, middle grade fantasy that has certain mythological elements to it, I would definitely recommend Withering-by-Sea. I think that, like I said, it just has these Roald Dahl vibes. It reminds me of classic fantasies, very much like The Secret of Platform 13. So definitely recommend it, and I gave it 4 stars. And the final book that I read in the month of March is Premeditated Myrtle by Elizabeth C. Bunce. This was the Cozy Escape Book Club's March pick, which is hosted by The Cartaginist. I will link her channel down below. I've been talking about her channel quite a bit in my videos because I just love her book club, and if you like cozy mysteries, you should definitely follow her. This was a cozy mystery middle grade novel that follows Myrtle Hardcastle, who is a very rambunctious, very intelligent 12-year-old who's always curious. She wants to know what's going on. Her father is a solicitor, he's a prosecutor, and one day she learns that her neighbor across the street was found dead in her bathtub. Now, she was an elderly woman, and the coroner has deemed it a heart attack. But Myrtle is not convinced. She thinks that this woman was murdered. This elderly woman was really into gardening. She loved to grow lilies. Myrtle finds out that her garden of lilies has been destroyed. So she thinks that this elderly woman has been murdered for her lilies. Myrtle, like I said, is a very curious girl, and her curiosity is encouraged by her governess, Miss Judson. And I have to say, Myrtle and Miss Judson have a wonderful relationship. Miss Judson is such a motherly figure. I just love her presence. She really sides with Myrtle even when her father does not. And without giving any spoilers away, I will say that there is a reason why her father doesn't side with Myrtle or agree with her interpretation of events. But of course, his daughter is a child, so she shouldn't be involved in any of this anyway, so his concerns are also somewhat justified. This was a wonderfully fun mystery. At times I felt maybe it was a bit too long. I think it's over 300 pages. But there's also a lot of character developments, and we get to learn a lot about these characters, so it really propelled me to read the next books as soon as possible. I'm so glad that this was the book club pick, and I will definitely be continuing with the series. I gave it 4 stars. Let me know if you've read any of these books, if you have other middle grade novels that you read, or cozy mysteries that you read, or even cozy middle grade mysteries that you read. I'm always interested in putting new books on my TBR, particularly reading more recent releases. I'm finally reading recent releases, so I'm really happy to see what kinds of middle grade and cozy mystery novels are coming out. So let me know your thoughts, and if you love my content, like and subscribe, and I will talk to you all later. Bye now.